I think that's important.
Yes.
And, I think other than that, I think you have some things you want to say, don't you, Newt?
Yes, just a couple of housekeeping things as far as how this goes. We make sure we stay muted while the presentation is going on. Paul did touch upon time limits as far as responses and things like that. So we'll try to keep those to a minimum. We'll be done at 3 o'clock. With slight wiggle room. If
That's all right.
I'm not gonna sit there and be a stickler at 3:01. So
No. We learned that last time.
but anyway, enjoy the presentation. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to ask. If there's anything I can do to make it go smoother, I will. Otherwise, I will just be here bringing up those slides for you guys.
Yeah, bring up those slides, will you, please?
Sure.
Put it on the first one because I want to talk about it.
Okay.
Okay. This is, I heard this term a month or so ago, truth decay, and I thought it was kind of clever. And then I don't know whether it was Jane Ash or someone else indicated it's actually a book. So, and just rather than tooth decay, it's truth decay. And this is put out by Rand Corporation. And two authors are Jennifer Kavanaugh and Michael Rich. And I just thought the cover was kind of clever with all the little cricks and cracks in it. Indicating what they're talking about. And so I'm going to go through about 13, 14 slides. And then Charlie's going to talk for a while. And then we'll open it up for questions and comments. Okay? So take the next slide, Newt. Yeah. Okay. I just highlighted some things that were in the book about truth decay and some of the main points that they were making. And I'll go through them right now. And so the first is the 4 trends of truth decay that they identified. Increasing disagreement. I mean, we're talking about in our social and political life today, and in the past. Increasing disagreement about facts and analytical interpretations and data and so forth and so on. An example is, for safety of vaccines, health, trends in violent crime. Those are some of the examples that have been occurring. And then blurring of the line between opinion and fact. Journalistic pieces in all media outlets, newspapers, TV, radio, but especially I think social media has been one of the key ones because there's no oversight. So next one, please. Yeah, okay, now, yeah. Then the third one is increasing volume of opinion and personal experience over facts. An example is opinion and falsehood in all media. Rounds out verifiable data. For example, immigration on jobs and crime. Just think about a lot of the new vaccines that we have for coronavirus came from people that had immigrated here. And so we've had a history of people being immigrants that have done excellent things for our country. And that kind of thing gets drowned out. Declining trust in respected sources of factual information. Decline in public confidence in government, news outlets, judiciary, presidency. So we all have seen some of those going on. So next slide, please. So here is just, this was also in the book, kind of the trend of confidence in institutions, 73 to 2017. And newspapers, 40 to 50% down to around 20, 25%. TV news about the same. But Congress has gone from 40 down to about 10%. So they've really had their, so far as confidence in what they're doing or not doing. And so that just gives an indication of decline in their confidence in some key institutions. Next one, please. This one I found interesting. The incumbent re-election and retirement rates, 46 to 2014. Incumbents, and of course we all knew this. I remember I took some political science classes back when I was getting educated, and the number one thing of anybody in political office is to get reelected. It's like in the real estate, location, location, location. Anyway, incumbents reelected among those seeking reelection. I mean, look at that. You're talking 80, 90%. And so I'm thinking of people like Leahy from Vermont, Grassley from Iowa, and others. God, there's some congressmen there now that when I was in the federal government 30 years ago, they're still there. They're, God, they're in their 80s, and talk about the lack of fresh blood. And I think that's a problem, So on the bottom it says incumbents not seeking re-election. So that's down 10%, I mean, I just found that slide rather interesting. And okay, next slide, please. Okay, historical context. We all knew about the Gilded Age, and of course, most of us, none of us were living at that time. Some of my golf partners accused me that I was, but anyway. The Gilded Age, newspaper battles, yellow journalism. So that was part of it, the Roaring 20s and the Great Depression, and the birth of the tabloids and the rise of radio broadcasting. The 60s and 70s, of course, the whole Vietnam thing. There was a lot of distrust and government, media propaganda, rise of investigative journalism. So that's just some of the obvious historical context in this area. So next one, please. Drivers of truth decay, that the authors identified 4 of them. Human beings process information and make decisions more and more on pre-existing beliefs that more heavily weigh their experience over dates and facts. And I find that people that I grew up with back in Minnesota, that they've never traveled and gotten away from their local area, and have never experienced other kind of information and other people and cultures. They kind of have developed some real hard line experiences, and it's hard to, they just scared of anything foreign, quite frankly. Anyway, number 2, changes in information sources. And of course, the big one is the rise of social media. Increases the volume and speed of information flow. We all are very much aware of that. Competition between newspapers and broadcasting companies. The poor newspapers, you've got somebody like Facebook, and with all the information that they have on there and the extent to which people use that, they're taking all their advertisement away from regular newspapers. But anyway, wide dissemination of disinformation and misleading. But again, I really feel that social media has been a big factor in that. So anyway, next slide. As it becomes more complex, competing demands of fiscal constraints on having to reduce the emphasis of civic education, media literacy. When I went to school, we had history and civic education, and I think it was back in the early 2000s and stuff. That's kind of gone out of our both grade school and high school because they wanted to emphasize the sciences and other things. I think that's a real loss. And so young people just have no sense of history and the importance of voting and all that sort of thing. I think that's a very important one. They need this to evaluate information sources, biases, all the sort of things that we have out there in the media. And then political and economic polarization. Groups on each side become insular in their thinking, creating a closed environment. And so there's no discussion once you have your firm beliefs and what you believe in. So false information proliferates. So, okay, next one, please. Consequences of truth decay. Erosion of civil discourse. Without a common set of facts, it becomes nearly impossible to have a meaningful debate. You see that in Congress now, you see it in a lot of places. I know some of the relatives I have back in a small town in Minnesota. We stopped talking about, in the last few years. It's a shame. It's just ridiculous. Political paralysis, lapses in oversight, investigation, inability to arrive at final decisions. Disengagement from political and civic institutions. Policy uncertainty at the national level. We've seen a lot of that. Based on uncertainty, corporations, adversaries. And I'm going to talk a little bit about, I would say in this last 4 years, 2 words that kind of identify. I'll never forget Kelly M. Conway. It was early when the Trump administration got going. And she said, it may have been about the crowd at the inauguration between Trump and Obama. I don't know what it was. But she was at the reporter was saying something quite factual. And she says to him or her, I don't know what it was, that, well, there are alternative facts. And man, I'm telling you, we've sure heard a lot of that in the last 4 or 5 years. Anyway, next slide. Some solutions, possible solutions. How can civic education training and critical thinking be provided more effectively to children and adults? I think we need that back in our schools. I really do. And it's not even there at the college level. I've been teaching at the college level over the last 10, 15 years. And what policy, legal, or technology intervention could slow the flow of disinformation? And how can research professionals, academia, think tanks, to promote transparency and accuracy? How can new technologies be used to improve democratic process and participation, representation? And I have a few more slides, but maybe somebody would like to come in, and what others would you think would be appropriate to get a handle on this disinformation that we have? I just wanted to get some initial context, Charlie. You can, you'll have a chance after.
Sure.
Yeah, anyone? Yeah, Jane?
You know, something that struck me in the recent editorial that Kalani did in the bulletin, his discussion about how important it is to listen to people, to understand what has shaped their beliefs, feelings, what their experiences have been, and how that impacts on how they perceive a given situation. And, you know, that's a thing that I try my darndest, you know, as a teacher over the years to do a lot of, but it is really easy to get carried away with one's own strong feelings about your experiences and how that impacts how you see things. And it's easy to stop listening. And it is amazing that when you do that, you begin to get ideas about where there is some common ground and how you could possibly move forward together on something that's important.
Anyone else? And oh, take off your sound or whatever. The mute. Take off your mute. Anyone else have a comment? Otherwise, I'll move on and we can come back to it. Okay, anyone else? Okay. Newt, go to, I just have 2 more slides, I think. Oh, wait. Yeah, go to the next one. The challenge is complex solutions hard. Pursuit of the work will likely require partnerships, media company interest in solving this phenomenon. This is just, you know, hoping for the future, basically. I have 2 more slides. It's on an economic issue. It's not related to this, but with all the thing that's happening the last few days, I thought it was important to do it. So go to the next slide, Newt. Oh, now this is just, all I'm saying is here that, you know, we've had really serious crisis in the past. This is kind of a picture of the Great Depression. And we got through that. And of course, we got through World War II. And we got through the Vietnam fiasco. We can do it again. I mean, I know we can do it, but we've done it before. That's all I'm saying here. And I'll go, the next 2 slides are the economic ones I wanted to end up.
Imagine you were born.
Okay, I was last weekend, I was watching the women's golf tournament. It was in Florida. And they were flying around with their blimps and so forth and showing the homes. And I thought to myself, good gracious, look at these lovely homes. They're, and the people that living in them, I'm sure they've worked hard and they deserve it, but many of them are part of the investor class or have good professional, we're fortunate to have good professional training, good families that allow them to do that. And so that's one side of America. And that represents about, at the most, 20, 25%. Now go to the next slide. This is another side. About 50% of the people in our economy today have 1 paycheck away from being homeless or not having enough food or not being able to pay their rent. And this is the side that is actually happening right now. And so we have these 2 sides of America right now. And with Trump not signing this recent congressional item, it's just going to get worse. But we do have 2 sides in America now that really represents, for the richest country in the world, I just think it's ridiculous. That's my personal opinion. I feel very strong about it. Anyway, that's the end of my comments. I think, Charlie, why don't you take it from there?
Okay, thanks, Paul. Is my audio okay? Or are we going to have to do something?
Yeah, you're fine. Yep.
Okay. Paul, one of the things I wondered was, well, first of all, let me, in case other people don't know, let me just read this from RAND. The RAND Corporation is a research organization that develops solutions to public policy challenges to help make communities throughout the world safer and more secure, healthier and more prosperous. RAND is nonprofit, nonpartisan, and committed to the public interest. And I assume that you probably had pretty much a good bit of inner you used some of their services, I assume, as a government employee.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they were a major contractor for government. Yes, we had them do a fair amount of our analysis at different times, and we all know about some of the defense issues that they've done for the government.
Like the Pentagon Papers.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking of.
So do you happen to know on this report whether they were commissioned or whether they just did it on their own?
That I don't know. I have a feeling that this was done on their own, but it could have been done for someone else. But I just have a feeling it was done on their own.
Yeah, I kind of thought that. I found this interesting. They have standards for high quality research and analysis, 10 standards they have. And I'm just going to read you the first one, and you're going to say, oh, yeah. Their first one is the problem should be well formulated and the purpose of the study should be clear. And then they go down from there, and I just think that's wonderful. Now, we kind of suppose that they did this investigation on their own. And let me read from this report to give you an idea why they did it. Quote, much has been written about the growing disregard for facts, data, and analysis in political and civil discourse in the United States. Increasingly, it seems that important policy debates, both written within the federal government and across the electorate, are as likely to hinge on opinion or anecdote as they are on objective facts or rigorous analysis. However, policy decisions made primarily on the basis of opinion or anecdote can have deleterious effects on American democracy and might impose significant costs on the public. Now, unquote. Now, this report was published in January of 2018. Today, I would replace their last sentence with the following. However, policy decisions made primarily on the basis of opinion or anecdote are having deleterious effects on American democracy and are imposing significant costs on the public. It's just incredible to me in the last, even the last 2 years.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so now what they are doing, again, a quote from them, in this report, we contend that truth decay is a phenomenon that has historical roots. And of course, you addressed that, is exacerbated and accelerated by recent changes in U.S. information and political systems, and threatens democracy, social discourse in the United States, and even individual well-being. Despite and to combat a lack of clear research on this issue, RAND has synthesized a strategy to investigate and potentially correct the negative consequences of truth decay. We describe this research well, and so forth. Now, either you or Jane, are you familiar with the report they issued last year?
I don't think so.
Evidently not.
No.
Okay. They in this report, they laid out a path forward for research on this very issue. And then they did their own first report along that path last year. And I have not looked at that. That's something I do need to look up. And let me do one other thing here and see about comments. Again, quoting from their report, it is worth noting that although we are calling the phenomenon truth decay, we are not talking about truth in the philosophical sense and therefore do not offer a specific definition of truth. There are long-standing debates over the nature of truth, whether there is an absolute truth, and whether the truth is knowable at all. We are aware of these discussions, but we do not engage them directly. Instead, we use the term truth decay as a shorthand for the trends just identified and focus on the importance of facts and fact-based analysis rather than on truth, in quotes. I think it was quite appropriate that they did not go off into the philosophical idea of truth, because that would be very hard to work with, as if what they've already done wasn't hard to work with. Are there any comments before I have one more thing to put on?
Oh, all I wanted to say is that you can go online at this book, Truth Decay, and you can download it for free, or you can buy the book for $30, $35. But you can download it if anybody's interested in reading it. And
Yes, and of course that's what I did, and there's a lot in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So turn off your mute so you can everybody can talk, or anybody that wants to talk or comment.
Well, I guess the other thing I would comment on is what I call the hang time of truth. I mean, some of our leaders, political leaders, more often than not, will say something and present it as being their firm position, and these are the facts. And within as little as a few hours, maybe a day, they will express an opposite point of view.
Yeah.
And that in itself sort of conveys the idea that truth and belief are very plastic and transient. And I just offer that as another element of sort of like the decay of truth.
I think therein lies the problem, a good part of the problem. As I listened to what Charlie was reading about the guidelines, the basis for this study, they don't define truth. Everybody has a different perception about what truth is.
That's always been the case, hasn't it? I mean, is this really a decay, or is this just a description of the way life is? We all live in our own little bubble. And I know the truth. I know what the truth is. Yeah, and my friends know it too.
Yeah.
You know, we share that same information, that same truth. And then the country votes in a way that just absolutely bowled me over. And I realized I don't know the truth. I don't know what is true for everybody. And you know, how do we find out? And I had civics. I know how government works. A lot of people vote without that knowledge. They have no idea, you know, what they're doing. They just do it because somebody told them they should. So I do agree with them that we need more civics education, more critical thinking education, more of all that sort of thing. But we also need to, as Jane pointed out, listen to each other. And listen beyond this little group here. I'm not sure how to do that. I'm not sure how to get in touch with those other people without having to watch Fox News, and I, you know, can't bring myself to do that. But maybe I should. Yeah,
I do it once in a while, and then after 2 or 3 minutes, I turn it off. Anyone else, please comment other people's viewpoints. Anyone else? John?
Need
Turn
to
off your
unmute
mute.
yourself, John.
You're mute.
John, you're muted.
You're muted, John.
Yes, I'm talking to myself. Sorry. Okay. Well, it's all too complex and I can't understand much of what I hear. So anyway, that's another story. No, I'm not as optimistic as many of you are. I think that critical thinking is something that is not available to every human being. You just can't do it. So I see that attempts to expand critical thinking are never going to provide for an improvement in the way people act or interact. It's just not feasible. Actually, I think that's because people thinking requires way more effort than most people have time to do. Okay,
Yeah.
and so telling them, that they're not, and actually one of the other things is fundamentally people make up stories. Okay, so they make the truth. They tell stories that reflect the truth. We do it just as much as the people on the other side of our social issues. And I notice in myself, look, I got a PhD in critical thinking. Okay, now I have some sense of experience with it over a 50 or 60 year period. And even I oftentimes do not spend the energy to engage in critical thinking. Okay, I mean, it takes too much time. I got other things to do, and so do other people. I see the problems are in our understanding of other people. Okay, so in a sense, James, listening to other people is important, and that's a real struggle when people spew some of the stuff they do. Okay, and it's hard to appreciate what they're saying, and so we end up trying to educate them. I have a friend who believes everyone can be educated in accordance with his thinking. And it drives me nuts. Okay, that's that, and if you engage in that with other people, it's going to drive them nuts too. The other thing I want to mention in regard to this is that fascism, I got interested in this stuff when I was in California 50, 60 years ago, when I was quite young. I don't understand how I got interested in, but fascism, there was a man named Theodore Adorno who tried to explain. He's a Jew who was forced out of Germany before the Holocaust. Okay, so he was some ways lucky enough to get away. And one of the things that I've just learned about him is that he believed that fascism, what we're seeing in America today, and is likely to see over a period of time being played out in some fashion, even when Biden's presidency, because the people who buy into it are not going to go away. Okay, and the way he sees it is that fascism is a consequence of a failed democracy in some sense of the word. And one of the things, I guess I'm going on, I could spend a lot of time talking about this. Trump is due to Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton. Okay, they're the ones who convinced Trump that he ought to run for president because they thought they could beat him. Okay, and the problem for Hillary is that she was running as a candidate for a class of people that are relatively small in the population. Okay, and so she was unable to reach people who had very different experiences. And so somehow we need to find a way to tap into the problems that these people have. Okay, not necessarily, I mean, they will articulate them, but they're really confused because they don't even understand what the problems are. They just know that it doesn't feel good. Okay, and so somehow we have to do more than listen. We have to see what's causing their discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we
And
do have to listen. I don't think there's any question. And I think that's been a part of the problem.
Yeah, I would very much agree with that.
Anyone else? Rosemary, you want to comment?
Well, I think just going back to what Jane says, which is paramount to everything, listening to the other person, just very carefully listening instead of jumping in, cutting them off. And I have to say, I think it just is a reflection on how impatient I am sometimes. And I jump in. And as soon as I've opened my mouth, I try to step back and tell myself, I've got to listen. They have something important that they feel they need to say. And although in these days and times when we're just so divided, I find it very challenging to really sit back and listen, because it's, you know, it rattles my cage when I feel like the truth that I believe is the truth, and listening to them, and it takes a big effort to step back and listen. But I think that's something that all of us need to either really look at. For myself, something that I need to continue to improve on.
Anyone else? Susan, Nancy, Carol, anyone?
Paul, it's Elisa.
Oh, Elisa.
Yes, I wanted to go back to something that John said, and that is that, you know, there's a whole community of people out there, and usually it's people who are poor, who are say on the lower middle class side. But, you know, when I listen to the news, they never talk about income inequality. It doesn't matter which news source you're talking about. And income inequality in this country is a big issue.
With that, Lisa.
And that is why a lot of people feel very disenfranchised about everything that's happening in this country. But, you know, Cliff and I listen to the PBS because we think that's about the most neutral source that you can hear or listen to. But the thing is, every time they do it, they show the stock market. The stock market, unless you have a pension that's being held in the stock market, or unless you hold stock, it has nothing to do with you. But if you don't have a stock in some form or fashion, which is most of the people in this country, then that has nothing to do with you. We should talk about the reality that begins to recognize some of these, the condition that some of these people live in, because it's income inequality. And I think it's a big issue for us, and we're not addressing it.
Yeah, well, 84%, 10% of the population owns 84% of the stock.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just ludicrous. And then they have all this money, and people ask, well, how come the stock market's going up with the low interest rate? There's just nowhere else to put it. So they just keep, you know, spending it on stocks. It's just a fact.
You know, I was having a discussion with my hairdresser, and she's a Trump fan, and we were trying to have a discussion. And so I said to her, okay, well, tell me what it is that he has done that is, you know, so great, that really has helped you. And her response was, yeah, we have a roaring economy. Ooh. And I thought, how much have you, you know, and so you're trying to have a good conversation, but she really thinks that the roaring economy has helped her. She hasn't had a raise in 10 years, but doesn't make the connection.
Yeah, but the rhetoric works. Let's be honest.
Yeah, but they believe that.
Yeah, they believe it. They believe it. Anyone else?
Yes, yes, Paul. This is
Go
Jack
ahead.
Welch.
Yeah.
Do you folks remember when Don Neidig made a presentation at Roundtable about a year, 18 months ago about perception and decisions, not only for climate change, but on the political and social realm? He talked about tribalism.
Oh, yeah.
And that people identify with the tribe that has nothing to do with logic or rational thinking, and they go along with the tribe. That's why we have millions of people vote against their own self-interest, because it's in their tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I remember Don's talk very well.
Oh, yeah, I do too. Yeah. Yeah, there's a book, it's an older book now, about why does Kansas vote emotionally and not for their economic well-being.
Right.
And the book goes into that same kind of thinking.
Right. The title is "What's the Matter with Kansas?"
Yeah, yeah, right.
But the point that Don made is rational thinking is not part of most people's decision making.
Yeah.
But
There are emotional attachments
Yes,
that mean
very
more.
much so. Yeah. Very much so.
yeah, let me, the other thing with regard to tribalism and so on, the other thing that is, I guess, taking a beating of late is the role of experts or in setting the tone. Now, some of that is because they've screwed up, but most of us, whether it's you go to your friend and say, hey, I don't know how to, my car is doing this, what do I do? And your expert in this case is the guy down at the corner garage back in the day. But we see some of the same things now with medicine or with the vaccine question, for example, where we had a little bad research done about 3 decades ago, and that has been used to great damage.
Yeah, it has.
So the credibility of that person, the scientists or researchers now say, well, that was an error and so on, but that has stuck, and of course the media love to echo that error.
Yeah. No question. Yes. Anyone else want to comment? Carol, you want to comment? Susan? Just looking for anyone else that wants to.
Well, I have another comment. Perhaps it'll be more coherent than the first one. I think that the problem we're faced with is something called systems. One of the things that's happened in my lifetime is that we've gone from a situation in which the systems of our lives and it's systems that our brains create have become so more complex than they were when I was a kid. When I was a kid, you could understand a car. Today, you have to have a computer readout device in order to have any idea what the car is doing. And that's just one example of the systems and the complexity that they've sort of exploded over our lifetime, or at least my lifetime. Things went from simple to complex, and we are not teaching people, children, to think about complex things. We're just not doing that. And I think part of it is just the knowledge of systems is something that has evolved over my lifetime, just as the systems have evolved over my lifetime. And,
mine too. Yeah.
And we've not figured out a way to educate people to deal with the systems in their lives. And so they're mostly confused about things. For example, they're confused about what's in their self-interest. Some people are told what's in their self-interest by the pastor or the priest or the reverend that they have. Other people sort of just struggle along. And, until we find a way to teach people how to approach the systems in their lives, we're not going to get very far. And they end up voting for a person like Trump, who tells them that he knows all about things because he's a millionaire or a billionaire and he can solve things. And no one asked him, well, what are you going to do to solve these problems? He never explained it. Now, one of the things that I think, if he had tried to explain it, he would have just showed his own ignorance. And nobody does that.
I just want to, I used to be able to fix a car back 30, 40 years ago. I wouldn't even attempt it today. But
I was reflecting on what Jack was saying about that great roundtable that was done year and a half ago or so by Don. And we talk about how important it is to be able to think rationally about these systems. On the other hand, if you remember the roundtable that was done with regard to Jonathan Haidt's book, I can't even remember the exact title, but it was all about how people make moral decisions. And he said, and this guy spent 30 years of his life now studying this, that what his research tells him is that we are enculturated by our tribe, those people we associate, we grew up with, and that we had experiences with, and we make a decision about what is moral. Then we use the capacity for critical thinking, for rational thought, to justify what we have already decided in our guts is moral or is the truth. And this makes it incredibly difficult and complex to really find ways that we can come to agreements about what the problem is. I was interested that they start out by a clear definition of the problem, and just actually even figuring out what the problem really is difficult. And we have to, as John and others have said, somebody said it so well, I think it was John, we have to figure out how that problem is affecting and impacting the people if we're really going to do something that resolves the problem. And I don't know how we elevate our conversations and our thinking and planning together so that we can, in fact, incorporate all this to come up with a solution when we're talking about something big at the macro level. But I have spent many years working with people from the Institute of Cultural Affairs. And as I observe and work with them, and they're doing strategic planning with a group of people where it seems like a bright future for the organization is just so unlikely. By getting everybody's thinking out on the table, hearing everybody out before you come up with the plan, I have seen them, everything from big corporations to small nonprofit organizations, help organizations go forward and do great things.
Yeah. Carol, I see your picture there. You want to make a comment? Your mute is off.
Carol, you're muted.
Muted. You're muted.
There you go.
Finally found the right. No, I just have no success trying to talk to people who don't think like I do.
No matter how hard we listen.
Right, they're not convincing me.
That is very well stated.
They don't give me a chance to get a word in edgewise.
Go ahead. Newt?
Well, yeah. I can say that I had a minor success in my communications with my father. I grew up in a very conservative house, and for a time considered myself to be pretty right-wing conservative. As I grew older and learned, I shifted more to the middle. I'm pretty independent, and I try to listen to both sides of the story as much as possible. But I gathered my truth, and from the research that I did and the opinions that I formulated, and when Trump was elected 4 years ago, it was unbelievable to me. I just didn't understand. I couldn't understand. And now I understand more of how it happened. I did more research and saw the logistics and all that stuff. And but my dad was one of the people that voted for him. And it's very difficult to talk to him about politics, because as soon as we start, because he loves me, I love him, he respects me, and I respect him. But when it comes to politics, it's very difficult to it's difficult to talk with him. Usually it ends up, no, we just need to stop talking about this, otherwise I get angry. And I'm like, okay, Dad, fine. All right, you're allowed to be angry. That's fine. But I slow played it. It took many, many years, but the last time I had a discussion with him about politics, he said, and I view this as an improvement, because he decided not to vote for Trump for this. Now, the reason why I view this as an improvement, obviously that's an improvement, but he didn't vote at all, I don't think. So I tried to convince him to vote again, or to vote, but he just was upset with the whole system. But I thought, okay, at least he didn't vote for Trump. At least he saw some things that were happening that he couldn't be on board with, and he didn't let what we were talking about earlier about his morals, he didn't let his own morals get in the way. Like he started developing things and thinking a little bit more about it, making rational thoughts instead of emotional reactions. And if that can happen, it gives me hope. It gives me hope.
Very well said. Very well said. I teach economics, and one of the foundations we have is that before I start teaching it, I go through a whole list of conditions, and rationality is one of them. You've got to have rational decision making, or otherwise you can't analyze properly. And as I've gone through life, that kind of thinking, I'm wondering if it's legitimate, and I've been teaching this way for many years. So you've got to have a basic set of facts and rational thinking before you can develop models and predict the future and so forth. And so once you get into that groove and try to then realize that, some people aren't on the same plane that you are, and so it's tough.
Paul, let me follow up on that and these comments that have been coming out about the fact that we are almost in a post-fact world, according to a lot of people. You just don't worry about facts. Here's my final quote from the report. They say many observers and analysts have responded to these trends in the political environment by arguing that global society has entered a post-fact world, or by focusing on the spread of fake news, broadly defined.
Mhm.
They say, we believe that the argument is inaccurate and the focus is misplaced. First, as noted earlier, facts and data have become more important in most fields, with
Mhm.
political and civil discourse being striking exceptions. So what are these fields where facts are important? I find this kind of cute. Architects rely on data to build bridges and buildings that do not collapse. Large manufacturing corporations rely on data to make operations more efficient and to improve products. Military planners use data and analysis to ensure that unmanned spy drones don't survey the correct target, and that aircraft carriers are not lost at sea. Even baseball, football, and basketball teams increasingly rely on data to determine which players to draft, which to play in which situations, how to tailor strategies to individual opponents. Thus, it is hard to argue that the world is truly post-fact. And so it becomes obvious from this, I'm unquote now, it becomes obvious from this that we use facts when we really figure there is a need to do so. What we got to do is figure out how to get other people to have a need to use facts.
Yeah, and the people that developed the vaccine for this coronavirus, they use facts.
Indeed.
You know, I mean, they did. There's no question about it. And so that's what's going to solve the dilemma we're in, and it's not going to be somebody saying something else. Anyone else have comments?
Yeah, but the problem is that the facts need to be able to be used by whoever is processing them. The key is being able to use facts. And what you have is that highly trained people like biophysicists know how to use the facts that they're interested in. What we need to do is get everybody to be able to use facts in their particular life. And that means that they need to be trained by the society so that they have the tools necessary to use the facts.
We have thought we knew facts in the past. For instance, DDT. That was all based on facts. That was developed by scientists in the military, and it served a purpose, they thought, and then they realized the consequences. So, you know, I mean, hindsight is wonderful. But
well, you have to use it, though.
We thought this was going to be a real boom to growth of plants, and the farms were going to just produce all kinds of food, and all they were doing was killing the wildlife. And actually they wound up killing a lot of the plants too, because they didn't have the wildlife that was necessary to you know,
make the plants work
and make the growth. So I mean, the whole thing was, and it was killing people.
Yeah.
You know, that we move real fast sometimes, and without considering the interconnectedness and the consequences to everything else.
Yeah.
Well, that's certainly true in the current vaccine situation. We all are old enough to know thalidomide existed and was heavily marketed.
Yeah, I remember that. Boy.
The human model for DDT.
Right.
Given that it is still possible, unfortunately, with these vaccines, that something will emerge. But again, you do use the data as best you can in the time frame you're given.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too, because right now, yes, we know a vaccine is working in preventing some symptoms now, but how long? And what might it be later on as time goes on and we have more data?
Yeah.
Yes, get the vaccine. I don't know.
Well, we're at about the hour mark here, so unless we have some real driving comments, this has been a good session. Thank you all for participating, and give a clap to all of us.
Thank you.
And I want to say next Sunday, we're going to have Peter Gibson. He's director of Retake Our Democracy here in New Mexico.
Oh.
And Bob Libby will probably join him, he's a local member of that organization. And so it should be a very good discussion there. They have legislation they want the upcoming New Mexico legislation to consider. And so it should be a worthwhile discussion.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Bye.
Charlie.
See ya.
Yep.
Mute.